Questions surfacing over President Trump's allegation that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower in New York amid a full week of media stories involving the Trump administration and Russia. But do these allegations have the potential to overshadow these headlines? Joining me now is Mark Dubowitz, Executive Director for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you very much for talking to us, Mark. You know, the president's wiretap allegations obviously have become the biggest story today, a huge story for us. But the big story, though, of the week, and one that we shall not forget about and we will continue to cover, is the Attorney General Jeff Sessions recusing himself of the investigation into Russia's ties with the election. So now that Sessions says that he is going to submit written answers to questions about his Russia contacts, the question is, how much is this controversy making it to develop and implement in effective Russia policy?
Julie, I think it's making it very difficult for the Trump administration and for the U.S. political system to really focus on the bigger question here, which is the significant threat that Russia represents to U.S. global interests. Having said that, I think the Trump administration has already announced and is starting to move forward on a policy that must be making Vladimir Putin very concerned. Defense buildup, nuclear modernization, the unleashing of U.S. energy resources, and putting Iran on notice, Russia's closest ally. So they're moving forward with broad strokes, but of course they're obviously going to be very distracted by these allegations.
Do you think that'll put some of the left's, accusations of the Trump White House being in the back pocket of Putin, when obviously this is a sign of President Trump pushing back to Russia? If he was going to be doing Russia any favors, this would not be one of them, for example?
Yeah, Julie, I'm very skeptical that, in Washington's very polarized political atmosphere right now, that anything's going to be put to rest, or we're going to move away from this story to the broader story. And I think the broader story is that every U.S. president since the end of the Cold War has tried to diminish tension with Russia, has reached out to the Russians, has tried to have some kind of reset. Most of those have failed, especially when Vladimir Putin became the leader. And the Trump administration probably wanted to try the same thing, but the reality is, in terms of the broad strokes of their policy, as I mentioned, I think Vladimir Putin would be very concerned right now that the U.S. is going to be moving towards a much more robust posture.
Do you think that President Trump was overly optimistic heading into the White House on his dealings with Putin? He had, tried to seem as if he was going to try to be diplomatic with Putin. During the Obama administration, Russian President Vladimir Putin established that Russia was a major power player in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. And it's just not that administration, because every administration since the end of the Cold War has tried to find some kind of way to lessen the tensions with Russia. And now with Iran claiming that it test-fired a Russian-made air defense system, it goes to show that's a slap in the face, once again, to yet another presidential administration. I mean, how should the Trump administration handle Russia's involvement with Iran? Let's start with that.
Yeah, let's start with that. I mean, I think, Julie, the Trump administration isn't and shouldn't be naive about Vladimir Putin, who's become the major power player in the Middle East, in the vacuum that President Obama left in the Middle East, as well as in Eastern Europe. And so with the Iranians on the march, with a deeply flawed nuclear deal that's going to give Iran a patient pathway to nuclear weapons, and with the Russians and the Iranians really the dominant player today in Syria, and increasingly the Iranians in Iraq, the Trump administration needs a very aggressive and robust posture vis-a-vis the Russians and the Iranians. And I think you saw signs of that. Unfortunately, I think these political events in Washington are a massive distraction. They need to be investigated, they need to be followed, but obviously the enemy is not within, the enemy is abroad, and we need to focus on the real enemy.
And the biggest enemy of all is ISIS. And it's interesting because coming from the Trump administration, they are saying that they now want to sort of shelve the terror plan and how they're going to defeat ISIS and work with Moscow in order to do it. What does that say to you, that we're sort of pulling back a bit in working with Russia to defeat the one thing that we want to defeat the most, and we're not necessarily going to lean on Russia to do so?
Julie, it wasn't ever really clear to me that Russia was really a partner in the war against ISIS. And the fact of the matter is that Russia and Iran today are fanning the flames of sectarian warfare, not only in the Middle East, but globally. And in fact, doing everything they can, I think, creating a situation where they're the greatest recruitment gift for ISIS. So I wasn't always a big fan of this relationship with Russia. The Trump administration, I think, wanted to explore it. It's going to be much more difficult for them to do so now, given the events in Washington.
Okay, Mark Dubowitz, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on.